Welcome back to the Marvel Review Series as we take a look at Iron Man. Iron Man is kind of a big deal in the Marvel Universe these days, thanks to the first Iron Man movie basically acting as a foundation for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so I felt it only appropriate to start the individual reviews off with him. Iron Man is based off of the 2008 film, and so there's definitely a bit of uncertainty about it, since as we've seen before, Marvel movie-based video games don't always tend to suck. However, while Iron Man tries its best to make you feel like the title character, level design and control issues can cause some pretty severe performance issues. The story is based somewhat on the plot of the film, though most of the events that occur after Stark's kidnapping use some creative license to expand on it. The most ironic thing about the story here is that it introduces advanced idea mechanics, better known as AIM, which would end up later being introduced in Iron Man 3. AIM serves as the main bad guys and you'll fight against all of their tanks and planes, though you'll also get to face off against Obadiah Stane, aka the Ironmonger from the film, by the end. The plot tries to weave Stane's betrayal with AIM, and it kinda works. Overall though, the plot does what it needs to do to justify why Iron Man enters each level and has to blast away at everything in sight. The gameplay has you entering a small open world type of a level and fulfilling numerous objectives. However, only 3 missions in and you'll come across the biggest issue with the gameplay design. Each level essentially will play out the same. You enter a level and Jarvis will highlight some targets and you'll take them out. Then Jarvis will highlight some more threats and you'll blast them too. Then a boss will show up, you'll defeat the boss, and then fly up to the next level. It's definitely a prime example of repetitive gameplay. The one thing that kinda sets each level apart are the heroic objectives. The game will at times task you with an objective that requires you to act one of 2 ways. For instance, in an early stage, Rhodey will call Stark telling him to take out American fighter jets without hurting the pilots. So you can choose to grab onto the jets and release the pilots, or just blast them out of the sky. If you pass the objective, you get more points for upgrading your suit, and if you fail, you get nothing. A big issue that I took with the level design here is that if you die at any point during a mission, you have to start all the way back at the beginning of the level, every single time. However, these objectives along with the standard ones become a nightmare when you start to factor in the controls. Flying around as Iron Man is easy enough, and it can be fun to fly and shoot simultaneously, but the minute you try to engage with enemies, the hell begins. You don't lock onto enemies in a traditional way where you can easily move around them. The game just highlights the closest target. The best way to attack enemies is to hover in midair and fire at them. However, the button for hovering is also the button to elevate yourself, so at times you have to engage enemies and it looks like you're bobbing up and down like a moron, firing at random at whatever target happens to be the closest. Also, for some reason, the enemies are really aggressive, and at times you'll be bombarded with missiles and bullets coming from all directions, and trust me, it's not easy to dodge this stuff. The closer you get to enemies, the more screwed you are. It's during these moments that you feel like you're Tin Can Man rather than Iron Man. So for most of the game, I found myself miles away from my targets, blasting them with my repulsors until I cleared out an area. And the boss fights work the same exact way. You have to put a huge distance between yourself and the boss, and slowly, and I do mean slowly, chip away at their health. The one problem I had with the game was the lack of power-ups for Iron Man. You get 3 basic moves to perform in each level. You can fire repulsors, launch missiles, and use the classic Iron Man Unibeam, but that's all there is. There are melee moves as well where you can punch enemies, but like I said before, getting that close to enemies is a death sentence, so I went the whole game without ever throwing a punch. I was disappointed that you don't get any other cool weapons to use with the Iron Man suit. I mean, you can't lock on missiles to multiple targets, there's no flares to distract missiles from coming at you, or other things like that. So each level has you taking down your enemies with the same moves over and over again, which just adds to the repetition. And also you're fighting the same enemies in each level, and it never changes. It's always the same planes, the same tanks, the same turrets, the same fighter jets, and it wears on you after the first few missions. A somewhat cool feature that's not really used to the best of its potential is the rerouting system. At any time during a level, you can tell Jarvis to reroute power to the suit, to the weapons, the thrusters, the life support, or the melee. The concept behind this is that the area you reroute power to should be stronger. However, the only 2 functions that really make a difference here are the thrusters and the life support. The thrusters give you the ability to boost around the level at top speeds for a longer amount of time, and the life support grants you more health recovery time. You'll never reroute power to melee since you'll never want to engage in hand-to-hand combat, and when you power up your weapons, you're really not going to notice a big difference, so you're better off just powering up your life support to help you out. There isn't much to do after the credits roll. The game gives you the one-man army mode, which has you entering the same levels from the campaign, and you get to take out 80 enemies in under 10 minutes. The only real reward for completing these missions are the alternate Iron Man suits, and I actually felt more like Iron Man in these suits than I ever did in the main campaign. The presentation is pretty bland all around. The cutscenes are a bit hard to look at since the models for the main characters of Stark, Pepper, and Rhodey are creepy. Robert Downey Jr., Terrence Howard, and Sean Toub reprise their roles, though the odd thing about the voice casting here is that Downey only voices Stark, not Iron Man. The stand-in is pretty decent though, putting on a good impression of Downey. The in-game levels are mediocre at best, there are some pretty bland textures, and when multiple enemies are on the screen, the frame rate does tend to dip pretty low. The best part about the presentation would be the design of the various Iron Man suits, which look pretty good up against everything else. The game can be a bit glitchy and buggy, though it's not too severe. In one mission, the game failed to load the rest of my objectives, so I couldn't end up completing the mission and had to restart, but this only happened once in my whole playthrough. Iron Man is not a good game, nor is it the worst thing in the world, rather it sits as a very mediocre and repetitive experience. There are times when you're flying around the level that you do kind of feel like Iron Man, though the game design breaks that immersion pretty quickly. If the Iron Man demo is still available on the PlayStation Network and the Xbox Store, you'd be better off just trying that out. It's free and it's pretty much going to show you everything the game has to offer. So come back next time as we look at a superhero with breathtaking anger management issues as we review Hulk.